Hello and welcome to State of the Economy, a show that connects you with key policymakers and thinkers. Today we have with us Mr. Saumitra Chaudhuri, Member Planning Commission and also member of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council. He will speak to us on the prospects for the Indian economy in the year ahead. Welcome to our show, Mr. Chaudhuri. The Prime Minister has recently taken over the Ministry of Finance. He's spoken of animal spirits, reviving animal spirits among businesses. What are the key doables which can be immediately be put into effect to revive investment in the economy?
There are a large number of such key doables, as you put it. I think it's worthwhile just thinking back as to why these animal spirits, as the Prime Minister said, which is basically the investment confidence that investors have. What is it that has brought them, made them low in the last few years? I think to begin with, there was the crisis of 2008-9 we all know of, and everybody in a sense got much more risk averse, and Indian investors, Indian companies were not an exception. However, after I think the crisis was handled quite well here, they started getting the confidence back, but then many things developed.
In fact, India was seen as having come out of that very well.
Very well, yes. Output returned very well, but investment always takes some time, and I think we started seeing signs of the investment returning in the early part of 2010. But then, as we all know, that there are many developments that took place in the political space thereafter, which made people think twice as to whether they were going to invest. There was also an issue that many projects got tied up with the clearances from various ministries, that different certain key ministries like coal, etc., weren't producing enough coal. There were issues with the electricity distribution companies, the finances of distribution companies, and all of them combined in a sense to pull the confidence, let's put it like this, confidence already down, prevented it from returning. So while there were some incipient signs in early 2010 that confidence was coming back and investors were looking at, starting up, picking up where they had left off before the crisis, that process got in a sense aborted at a very early stage. And people were just sitting on the sidelines wondering, now when is all this, this huge political hullabulla, when is it going to end, how is it going to end, and when they basically decided to wait it out. So the last 1 year, it just doesn't begin with the Prime Minister having taken over the finance portfolio, because
that has aroused some hope.
Yes, because in the last 1 year there have been many steps taken to actually straighten this out. As you know, coal output had declined by 15-17% in August and September of last year. Coal output is back on more or less on track. Many other things have been cleared up. But then there were other issues which also prevented, the full dividends to be reaped. For instance, there were issues about certain policy processes getting stuck up during the winter of 2011-12. Then there was I think some tax issues in the budget, which was a bit of a surprise to everybody. And that I think certainly dampened sentiment even further.
Which is now being sought to be reversed.
Yes. So I think one by one, all of these issues have to be taken up and taken forward, so that investors start believing the fact, which is the Indian economy has great prospects. They started having doubts about whether this has prospects. We need to clear the doubt.
The key question is, what do you do to revive confidence? So can you tell us some 2 or 3 steps that the government can take in the immediate future to actually kickstart investments?
Just to sort of set that record right, the fixed investment rate was about 33% in 2007-8, the highest value, and now it's around 29.5%.
So about 4%
over a period of 3-4 years from the previous peak. We need to reverse that. We need to make that go up. You asked me specifically, where can we expect investment to be forthcoming?
And also, can public sector play a big role, whether by itself or in a PPP format? That's the second part of the question.
Yes, it can. And let's take a few examples. For instance, we know coal output, as I said, was declining. Coal output has come back. In the month of May, coal output grew by 8%.
Sure.
So it's a huge comeback. And we know that, for instance, in Mahanadi coal fields, there is a place where there's a lot of coal is produced, but there are no evacuation facilities. There's a 50-kilometer stretch of railways which has not been built, so there's 70 million tons of stock which is difficult to move. So obviously we need to build that rail line. And if the Indian Railways don't have the money, then maybe Coal India or maybe some other party should just go ahead and build the rail line. There are many, let's say, low-hanging fruit like that.
Yeah, this is a case where demand way far exceeds supply.
Absolutely. Second, let me take the case of urea fertilizers.
Yeah.
I was chair of the committee. We have evolved a new investment policy.
You're working on an investment policy.
Yes, which was more or less agreed to in December of 2011. The note has gone to the CC and I hope it will be announced soon. If that goes through, we should be seeing the possibility of 6 to 8 large investments aggregating about 35,000 to 40,000 crores. Okay. The companies are all ready. They've done all the work and they're in a position to actually just issue the orders for purchasing the equipment. And all the big capital goods guys
in the pipeline.
In the pipeline, that can just come off like this. So that's, let's see, in a matter of maybe 10 to 14 days, that's something that can be taken up. So there are similar such issues in many other places. Ports, roads, for instance. Roads, we had got our act together a bit earlier. There was a certain period when road contracting had come off. But last year, actually year before last, we attended to this issue. Last year, against a target of 7,300 kilometers of awards, we've done almost 8,000. And this year the target is 9,500. So in many cases, we have actually been able to turn things around. In some cases, we are now in the process of turning it around. Last year, we wanted to do 18 major projects in the ocean ports. We could only do 2 because clearances were not in. Now we are going to do all of that 16 that got left over from last year, plus many more this year. So we need to put the step down. And in this case, as you may notice, the public sector and the government at large plays a big role. But the private sector will respond to this as long as they do not have worries about the financial viability of the projects, which is why we have been placing so much emphasis on the financial health of the electricity distribution companies.
We'll take a small break here. Please don't go away and keep watching Raj Sabha Television. Welcome back to State of the Economy. We are having a conversation with Mr. Saumitra Chaudhuri, Member Planning Commission and Member of Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council. Again, going back to what the Prime Minister said, animal spirits. Now, how do you deal with, as part of reviving animal spirits and reviving investment optimism, how do you deal with inflation, number one, and number two, interest rates? Yeah.
You see, stable prices is actually a precondition for growth. Nobody's ever had growth with very high rates.
History tells us,
yes,
growth has never been come along with inflation.
Yeah. So you need to be able to stabilize the price front, aside from the fact that it has serious issues of social equity are involved. Just from the investment point of view also, we need to be able to stabilize on the price front. Unfortunately, for a variety of reasons, I think success has been a bit limited on that front, partly because food prices have actually exercised a huge influence through and for running for nearly 30 months now, a huge influence on the overall level of inflation, pushing through the wages, etc. We need to take certain longer term steps to try and contain food price inflation. One of them, of course, being improving logistics, especially where perishable items are concerned.
The supply chain.
Supply chain.
Do you see an investment opportunity there also?
I think there's a huge investment opportunity. However, there's a lot of preconditions will have to be met, including some reform of the APMC kind of environment, which is a problem. We need to get over that. We also should be able to streamline our public storage and distribution system for grains, which government is the biggest buyer in that market. If we do all of this, it will give us results within 6 months to 1 year, but not perhaps immediately. However, let's put it like this, inflation, if you look at it in terms of manufactured goods, excluding manufactured food items, is still not very high. It's about 5.1%. At one point, it was much higher. So it's come off a bit. And let us hope that in the coming months, inflation will not surge. I don't see it coming off dramatically. I'm just hoping it will not surge. The problem with the Reserve Bank is that Reserve Bank, in order to be consistent with its policy on interest rates, have also been quite quite tough on liquidity, as a result of which there is a huge liquidity shortfall in the domestic market. This compounded by the fact that there's capital inflows are quite weak. So we need to attend to this by a combination of, I think, liquidity enhancing measures as well as measures to
And
make
you think some of the recent
flow.
announcements made actually do enhance the capital inflow prospects?
I think it does. I think it does.
The
And we
Monday
need to,
package, as it were, yeah.
well, there was no package on Monday, in a sense. There's only for government securities. But you see, which is a good step. I mean, the step the finance ministry took last Monday in increasing the access of FIIs to government securities was a good step. But it has to be supported by other measures which make Indian securities, in a sense, more attractive, whether they are government paper, corporate debt, or it is equities. And I think those measures are being taken slowly, and as they sort of unfold, I think we will see some improvement in the general climate as far as Indian investment prospects are concerned.
Okay. Do you feel that the psychology that existed about 4 years ago among Indian companies as well as global companies, that India is probably one of the best markets to operate in terms of returns, that story would still exist today? I mean, in spite of the pessimism that...
Let's put it like this. In 2007, we had an exceptional run of 5 years of very strong growth in all markets and all economies, and I think investors, in a sense, began to discount risk very steeply, as a result of which we had the crisis. Now, that situation isn't going to come back in a hurry. People are going to be much more risk averse, and they are going to want, both I think domestic investors and foreign investors will want to make the case for investment. They're not going to give you a free pass, and I think as they did in 2006 and 7.
Okay.
So they're going to be much more selective.
They'll make you work a little hard.
They're going to be much more selective, but I think if we take the right steps, and I think we know what those right steps are, we will get a suitable response.
Global companies are sitting on $3.6 trillion worth of cash. Now, it just got me thinking as to where will they invest this money. Now, what do you think? I mean, won't they, if growth is happening incrementally more this side of the world, I'm not saying just India, China, maybe Indonesia, some of that money will naturally have to come this side? I mean, isn't that tautological?
In fact, most of the money will be invested in developed countries, their own markets.
Okay.
Because the capacity of developing countries to absorb such large amounts of capital is limited without a serious disturbance on the price and in return front. But you have a point that American companies are now today fairly solvent. American banks may not be, but companies are, and they're sitting on a lot of cash. And I think that is a problem for the government, for the American government to resolve. Why are people sitting on cash and not actually investing? But let's look at it somewhat differently. If you look at 2012, for instance, something like 75 to 80% of the total incremental growth in the world is going to happen in developing countries, not in developed countries.
So therefore, doesn't it follow that some of that investment will come to drive this?
Yes, provided we, as I say, make ourselves attractive.
Even if we keep bad ideas out.
Yes. If you look at for example, our investments, most of our investments are financed from domestic savings. Likewise in China, likewise in most developing countries. But the top up, the 3, 4, 5% that actually comes from 5% of GDP that comes from capital flow is very important, especially for us, because we run a large trade account deficit, and something has to finance the trade account deficit. Companies also find it easier to raise capital from outside, so that's very important. So it's do we look attractive, or do we look, let us say, in a sense, extremely have a lot of people have forebodings about India. So we need to clear the air and say, okay, we are open to do business, and we are not going to go after you.
Basically, what you're saying that we really have to shoot ourselves in the foot, not to have some of these investments naturally coming into our country to be absorbed here.
I think the capacity of people to shoot themselves in the foot is very high throughout the world.
Not just India, right? Yeah. And especially in the current climate of global financial climate.
But let us remember one thing, that foreign capital is going to be more selective, and they don't mind. You see, today, for instance, what is the yield on 2-year US treasuries? It's just 7 bips 0.07%.
If you look at the FII inflows, India is actually, between Jan and now, is probably the second largest recipient of South Korea.
But I see, when I'm
inflows.
repeating that if you look at the yields which people seem to be satisfied with, from about 7 bips on 2-year paper, US paper, 5 bips on German bonds, that means there is a large high threshold to be able to for you to be able to cross in order to make capital come in, which was not the case earlier. So people are willing, in a sense, to give up a lot of return just for security, for sense of safety. So if you sort of do anything which makes that caution even more pronounced, then I think you're not going to get capital no matter what you do.
Okay. We'll take another break here. Please don't go away and keep watching Rajya Sabha Television. Welcome back to State of the Economy. We were having a conversation with Mr. Saumitra Chaudhuri, Member Planning Commission and Member of Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council. Mr. Chaudhuri, we were talking about what India needs to do at the very minimum to let a smooth flow of capital into this country, foreign capital as well as domestic capital go into investments.
Remember, after 2008-9, the crisis, there was this peculiar formulation. The greatest danger the developing countries face is large inflows of foreign capital.
Yeah, I know, that has got reversed.
That was not reversed. That was, I think, was completely baseless fear, the baseless apprehensions. But I think they did color a lot of how people did things. It colored them a lot. Second is, I think there was you take certain things for granted. Growth is going to come anyway, whatever you do. Foreign capital, where will it grow? 3.6 trillion, they have to come here, whatever we do. So I think, this...
So that was the height of Keynesian optimism, and today is the...
No, I think this is the height of misplaced optimism, based on completely unfounded views and wrong views. And that sense of when you think that you don't really, you're sort of immune to any mistakes that you can make, you're immune to any problems, you have it won, is when you actually lose the match. So I think we need to know that, yes, we have a lot of things are going right for us. As I said, more than 3/4 of the global demand is actually originating in developing countries. Asia is accounting for about half of incremental global demand. We are in a good and strong region. We have all our neighbors, by and large, are performing well. Africa is doing well. We need to enhance trade and investment relationships in this region. We should do that. It will give us a lot of potential growth going forward. But at no point of time should we suffer from hubris, in the sense that we already won the match, league and championship, and there's nothing that we can do that can actually upset the cart. Everything can be upset, and we need to be constantly realize that there is always a mountain to climb. We are not all the way walking downhill. So I think this is in a sense perhaps something that we should take away from the current experiences.
So how do you think the $75-80 billion that you're talking about, how do we ensure that this actually comes in smoothly in the year ahead?
You see, there are two parts to this. I mean, 11-12 we got about $67 billion, if I'm not mistaken, capital flows, but a lot of it was in the form of debt of various varieties. We need to be able to get more equity investments into the country. Whether the equity comes in the form of FDI or it comes in the form of FII, it doesn't matter. FDI is obviously preferable, but equity means the more risk capital being invested. What is animal spirits all about? It's about risk taking. So when you say we want to encourage animal spirits, we are not actually encouraging an animal behavior. Some people seem to think. We're simply saying, look, the capacity of risk taking should be increased. Every time a person invests in a new factory, that person takes more risk. Why should that person take more risk? If the rewards also not very clear, the person is not confident of investing in that area. So risk taking is animal spirit.
Spontaneous ability to take
Spontaneous
risk.
ability, confidence in the system. So that's why people don't invest in a war-torn area. People don't invest in a country which there's no law and order. So you need to ensure a certain amount of confidence in the system, how the law works, how contracts work, assurances about policies. People should not feel policies are predictable, that they won't be surprised at every turn. So those give you capacity for risk taking amongst your companies, amongst your investors. That's what gives you growth in the longer term, more jobs, more employment opportunities, more livelihoods. So we must ensure that people feel that India is a good place to take risk in business, to grow new businesses and take up new projects.
Now, where do you place the bureaucracy here? Today, unfortunately, we have a situation for the reason that you had cited earlier, some of the political problems that we've faced over the last 2 years, this whole civil society movement. We have a reasonably activist judiciary, we have a reasonably activist CAG. Now, all that has resulted in the bureaucrat who actually sits behind the desk and clears some of these projects which we spoke about. He's a bit scared, he's withdrawn into a shell. Now how do we do we make them?
I don't think that's neither fair nor true. Because if that was true, then we would not have been able to turn the situation around in coal and in so many areas.
Okay.
Yes, there will be some individuals. Let's put it like this.
So you're saying it's an exaggerated
no, I think there is
problem.
I think there's a certain fact in what you're saying, that the risk perception of a civil servant at the top of the heap, in a sense, who's retiring in 2 years or a year's time, risk perception has increased. So in a sense, he's less keen to take decisions, perhaps. But I think there are many exceptions. Our civil servants are of the first class, and people who sort of rise to the top, secretaries of government, additional secretaries, they are the best of the best, and they can rise above their apprehensions. Even if they have apprehensions, they can rise above it. And I think we need to create the atmosphere in the government where there's a sense of commonality, a sense of commonly together lifting a burden, so that people don't feel that they will get left out. And maybe those who may be less confident, they'll also follow. But I don't agree that everybody's got into a shell and not doing work. Maybe there may be a few cases, but I have seen so much evidence of people rising above these concerns and living up to the expectation of what you'd expect a top civil servant to actually display.
Yeah, sure. One more observation that I had was, do you feel that in the boom period, obviously animal spirits were very high and Indian companies were investing with a lot of optimism, and it also resulted in a situation where they took risks in a manner that resulted in their having made mistakes. For instance, if you look at the telecom sector, one of the biggest success stories, big investments, the sector grew from say 100 million subscriber base in 2002, roughly 2003, to 800 million in 2008, 9 or 10. 8 times growth. You never see such a growth anywhere in the world. Yet the telecom companies today, most of them are up to their eyes in debt. Balance sheets are bad. Now, the point I'm coming to is, did entrepreneur also made mistakes in reading the investment cycle or reading the business cycle?
See,
at a broader level.
I'm not very familiar with the balance sheets of the telecom companies as of date.
Or even aviation companies or even infrastructure companies.
But let's put it like this. People who in this area of aviation,
infrastructure.
I'm not very sure about telecom, but there has been, let's say, many cases where Warren Buffett once said, I never owned a share in an airline company, because every 7 years they go bust. Okay? So in a sense, there is a history of some of these sectors tend to get over-invested. People get very competitive. They slash fares in expectation of gaining market share, and then they find themselves into a jam. When they are very poorly placed when they are faced with the shock, and then they go down. So that happened to airline companies time and time over. In the case of telecom, that may or may not be true. I don't know exactly what's the problem with telecom. But certainly it's a very competitive business. And also when you have got large incumbents fighting for market share, they sometimes take calls which give them some near-term pain, but they feel over the longer term it may be worthwhile. But sometimes the near term gets extended, and then they have a problem. So I don't know
real
what the
estate,
case
for
is.
instance, real estate companies also.
Real estate is through the world. Real estate goes through these huge cycles. There is the period of overbuilding and overbidding. Prices go up. Stock gets built up. Stock then doesn't get sold. The prices corrects. It comes down. So I think some of these things, are the natural character of the business. Telecom is one I'm not very certain about, but natural character of the business, there is a lot of volatility. The players are familiar with that. For example, there is very little volatility in pharmaceuticals. That's why it's called a defensive stock in the share market jargon. Or let's say, fast-moving consumer goods are not considered to be a cyclical stock,
Sure.
but infrastructure very often is, because they do go through these cycles. Cement, for example, is classic case of a cycle. So they vary. I mean, this is something, let's say, policy shouldn't try to correct these things because that's the nature of the market.
Yeah, sure. That's what I'm coming to. So we are probably at the.
But you said something else. You said actually that in 2007, when things were very right, things were going very well, and it seemed that nobody could take a wrong step. People took decisions that got them into some amount of trouble later on. This is true across the world.
That's what I'm saying. So we are it's a business cycle. So, and because we are in a slight down cycle, that's why we are talking about reviving animal spirits,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Now, so one hopes that that through the right policy framework and through the right sort of noises. After all, psychology is all about making the right noise at various levels and then lifting, sentiment.
I think what psychology is this is about actually sensing what is it that is making people feel low about taking risk and attending that sense.
Okay, yeah.
It's not just psychology. It's sometimes very hard.
Yeah.
I mean, for example, taking up these issues regarding taxation and so on
I know,
are very concrete stuff. But that's what's really bothering people, and you need to be able to sort it out.
Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot, Mr. Chaudhuri. That's all we have in this edition of State of the Economy. We'll be back again with another episode soon. Goodbye.